He understands their dilemma at a time when their government does not agree with the package that is being proclaimed into law today. The Queen will now head towards the desk where the actual signing will take place, and Barbara, it's starting to rain very gently. One description is spitting, just a gentle rain. Let's hope it holds off. The moment the Queen puts her signature on this document, it becomes law. It will be witnessed later. The Constitution is now home. A fanfare in the background, as you can hear. Document.
Between 1867 and 1982, Canada transformed from a dominion tethered to Britain into a fully sovereign nation. It's a story of expansion, rebellion, war, economic collapse, cultural upheaval, and political breakthroughs. From the birth of Confederation to the patriation of the Constitution, these 115 years forged the country we know today. On July 1, 1867, the British North America Act united Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia into the Dominion of Canada. Ottawa became the new capital, and Sir John A. Macdonald its first Prime Minister. Canada had its own Parliament and Prime Minister, but foreign policy, constitutional amendments, and final authority still rested in London. The Governor-General represented the Crown, and Britain retained control of Canada's external affairs. Confederation was less a declaration of independence than a new administrative arrangement within the British Empire. Still, the idea of a self-governing northern nation had been born. Canada quickly turned westward. In 1869, Ottawa purchased Rupert's Land from the Hudson's Bay Company, a vast territory home to Métis, First Nations, and fur traders. But the transfer was done without consulting the people who lived there. Led by Louis Riel, the Métis at Red River staged a resistance, forming a provisional government and demanding their land rights be respected. Ottawa responded by sending troops, a show of federal power that left scars. Manitoba entered Confederation in 1870, but tensions flared again in the 1880s. As Ottawa pushed the Canadian Pacific Railway across the prairies, a project critical for uniting East and West, Indigenous communities were displaced, treaties were often ignored, and starvation spread when bison herds were wiped out. The Northwest Resistance of 1885 ended with Riel's capture and execution, a moment that deepened mistrust between French and English Canadians and between Ottawa and Indigenous peoples. Canada's population doubled between 1896 and 1914. Clifford Sifton's Last Best West immigration campaign drew hundreds of thousands of settlers from Eastern Europe, Scandinavia, and the U.S. to the prairies. Cities like Winnipeg, Toronto, and Montreal boomed as factories and railways expanded. Wheat exports fueled prosperity, but growth bred division. Immigrants often faced discrimination, and Indigenous lands were steadily encroached upon. In British Columbia, Chinese workers who had built the railway were barred from citizenship and subjected to a head tax. In Quebec, tensions simmered over language and culture, as English capital dominated the economy. Canada was becoming modern, but its sovereignty remained limited. Any constitutional amendment still required Britain's approval. When Britain declared war on Germany in August 1914, Canada was automatically at war. Yet, the conflict forged a new Canadian identity. Canadian troops distinguished themselves at the Second Battle of Ypres, at Vimy Ridge in 1917, and at Passchendaele. The Vimy victory especially, planned and executed by Canadians under Canadian command, became a symbol of national achievement. But war also divided the country. The 1917 conscription crisis, triggered by heavy casualties, split French and English Canadians. Prime Minister Robert Borden's government forced conscription through, igniting protests in Quebec. After the war, at the 1919 Versailles Peace Conference, Canada signed the treaty separately and joined the League of Nations in its own right. These moves hinted at a more independent role in world affairs. The 1920s were a decade of change. Women had gained the federal vote in 1918 and the right to run for parliament. The economy boomed with new industries, automobiles, radios, and consumer goods. In 1926, a constitutional crisis erupted. Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King asked Governor-General Lord Byng to dissolve Parliament and call an election. Byng refused, an extraordinary assertion of vice-regal power. The incident, known as the King-Byng Affair, outraged Canadians and spurred demands for clearer autonomy from Britain. It laid the groundwork for the Statute of Westminster 5 years later. In 1931, the British Parliament passed the Statute of Westminster, giving Canada and other dominions full legislative independence. No British law would apply to Canada unless Canada explicitly requested it. This was a turning point. Canada's Parliament now controlled its own laws and foreign affairs. But one key limitation remained: the Constitution itself. The British North America Act could still only be amended by Britain, because Canada's provinces and federal government couldn't agree on an amending formula. Canada was independent in practice, but not yet in its fundamental law. The Great Depression hit Canada like a hammer. By 1933, 1 in 3 workers was unemployed. Dust storms ravaged the prairies. Desperate men were herded into government relief camps for pennies a day. In 1935, thousands of unemployed workers trekked from Vancouver to Ottawa in protest, the On to Ottawa Trek, only to be stopped in Regina, where a riot broke out. New political movements emerged, like the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, CCF, advocating for public ownership and social welfare, and social credit in Alberta, promising monetary reform. The Depression permanently changed Canadians' expectations of government and set the stage for the welfare state. This time, Canada declared war on Germany on September 10, 1939, a week after Britain, affirming its independent status. Canada built one of the world's largest navies, trained thousands of Allied pilots under the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, and fought from Hong Kong to Normandy. The war supercharged Canada's economy and reshaped society. Yet dark chapters emerged too: the internment and property confiscation of Japanese Canadians on the West Coast, and a second conscription crisis in 1944, though less severe than 1917. When the guns fell silent, Canada emerged as a middle power, a founding member of the United Nations and NATO, and a leader in peacekeeping under Lester B. Pearson. The post-war decades were transformative. Immigration soared again, with newcomers from Europe and, increasingly, non-European countries reshaping Canada's demographics. Provincial experiments like Tommy Douglas's universal health care in Saskatchewan paved the way for national Medicare in the 1960s. Federal investments built the Trans-Canada Highway and the St. Lawrence Seaway. Canada adopted a new Citizenship Act in 1947, creating the first legal category of Canadian citizen distinct from British subject status. Internationally, Canada positioned itself as a peacekeeper, most famously during the 1956 Suez Crisis, when Lester Pearson's diplomacy diffused conflict and won him the Nobel Peace Prize. In the 1960s, Quebec underwent the Quiet Revolution, a sweeping secularization and modernization of society. The Catholic Church lost its grip on education and health care, and Quebecers demanded greater control over their economy and culture. Nationalism surged. The Parti Québécois called for sovereignty, and the radical FLQ resorted to violence, culminating in the 1970 October crisis. Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau invoked the War Measures Act. Troops on the streets, mass arrests without charge, a move both praised and condemned. Canada faced a stark question. Could it remain united? In 1965, Parliament replaced the old red ensign with the maple leaf flag, a bold break from British symbolism. In 1969, the Official Languages Act made English and French the official languages of federal institutions. In 1971, Canada became the first country to adopt multiculturalism as official policy, recognizing that diversity itself was part of the national identity. These measures reflected a Canada stepping out from Britain's shadow and redefining itself on its own terms. By the 1970s, Canada had only one major link left to Britain: its constitution. The British North America Act could still only be amended in London. In 1980, Quebecers narrowly rejected independence in a referendum. Pierre Trudeau seized the moment to promise constitutional renewal. 2 years of hard bargaining with the provinces followed. In April 1982, Queen Elizabeth II and Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau signed the Constitution Act in Ottawa. The act patriated the Constitution, bringing it under full Canadian control, and added the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, guaranteeing fundamental rights for all Canadians. For the first time in history, Canada had complete sovereignty over its own constitutional future. It was the culmination of a century-long journey. Canada's journey from dominion to full independence was not without cost. Indigenous displacement, language tensions, economic crises, and political upheavals. Yet each challenge shaped a more distinct nation. By 1982, Canada was no longer a dominion, but a fully sovereign country. A bilingual, multicultural democracy with a global reputation for peacekeeping and compromise. The story of independence is complete. The story of unity continues. Canada's path to independence wasn't just about laws, it was about identity, about who we are as a people. And this journey isn't over. In our next video, we'll explore how Canada has navigated its modern challenges since 1982. If you want to keep uncovering the untold stories of our nation, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because Canada's story is far from finished.